Hey everybody, Dr. Ben Edwards here. Welcome to another episode of You're the Cure. We've got a guest today that's going to be really enlightening and encouraging and educational. Dr. Al Cobb from the Blair Clinic here in Lubbock, upper cervical chiropractor specialist. He, along with Ben Hunt in our movement lab, and then Cassidy Luna, our pediatric nurse practitioner, are putting on a seminar this coming Tuesday evening. So that'll be is that the 4th, 5th?
March the
March
5th.
5th. Yep. At the
Mhm.
Merc, upstairs at the Merc. And you can go to the blairclinic.com and sign up for that, reserve your seat. And I brought Dr. Cobb on today to kind of give a little preview and a highlight of that, but also just talk about everything he's doing. He and Dr. Gordon Elder, some great doctors here in town. And even if you're from out of town, don't live here locally, I think there's a lot you'll be able to learn from this interview today. I know they've helped a lot of my patients, and I believe in what they do. So, Dr. Al Cobb, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be interviewed by you and just have a conversation. I remember it was pretty much the first or second weekend that I was here in Lubbock. I got to hang out at Dr. Elder's house with you and a bunch of other providers, and I was just immediately impressed by the way you carried yourself, by the dependence you have on the Lord, and the way that you're a leader in the community. And so I've kind of since I got here, I wanted to kind of model my professional life and clinical life to you, Dr. Edwards. So it's really an honor to be able to talk with you today.
Well, thank you for those kind words.
Yeah,
Um, Appreciate it. Um, just trying to be who God made us to be, and I know you are too.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think sharing your journey, your testimony, a little bit of how you got to where you are today
Mm-hmm.
from, I believe, is Tennessee, wasn't it? Isn't that where you grew up, Tennessee?
Yep. Tennessee.
Yeah. So kind of
Tennessee.
tell that story before we get into the concussion seminar that's coming up.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome, guys. I recommend you jump online and reserve your spot for that. And we'll get into that topic here in a minute. But a little background first, kind of share with the audience where
Yeah.
you came from and how you ended up in Lubbock, Texas, with the
Mm-hmm.
subspecialty of upper cervical chiropractic and with the
Right.
focus on concussion in particular.
Right. So I grew up in small town, Middle Tennessee, right on the border of Alabama, but far enough away to say that I'm not from Alabama. So we'll say that off the beat. But I grew up just north of the Alabama border, about an hour south of Nashville, in a small town called Pulaski, Tennessee. And I'm the youngest of five, so I always tell people that means that I was babied, but I never got to choose what I wanted to do, and I never got to pick the front seat. I never got to do what I wanted to do, and so I was always dragged around to softball fields, baseball fields, and all of the like, all the soccer tournaments, all the weekend tournaments. I was always dragged to it until I finally got to play myself. So I grew up the youngest of five, and everybody played sports. And so sports was such a massive piece of what I did and what I enjoyed doing. And I think eventually a lot of times we talk about identity and we talk about being who God's created us to be. A lot of times that can get muffled, it gets a little confused. And so for me, sports became my identity, and started to actually excel in football, particularly, and got a chance to play in college at the Virginia Military Institute. And so I was very grateful for that opportunity. But it's a different life when you're playing at the college level, and then you also are at a military institute. So my whole day was dictated based off the core calendar, and so pretty much it was a really interesting time to play up there, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I guess my story began with the concussion side of things. When I was a junior in college, I got my first diagnosed concussion, and who knows how many concussions I'd had up until that point, knowing what I know now. But I yeah, I got my concussion, and I talked about this recently on a podcast, that the culture in sport is so interesting that it's almost expected to play through pain, especially concussions. You don't tell anybody, you don't tell the training staff, you just kind of play and brush your shoulders off. But kind of going back a little bit, the Lord had saved me in 2012 when I was a junior in high school, and so I started to, over the years, start serving at Fellowship of Christian Athletes summer camps and really fell in love with it. So I knew that I wasn't really I didn't want to do the NFL. I didn't want to go to the NFL and play for years. That wasn't kind of my calling. I'd kind of been fed up with football and organized sports at that point. I'd played enough and I thought, I think it's time to hang up. So when I was done with college, I decided to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, and work for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, where I mentored high school athletes and students there, and I also got a chance to be a chaplain with the baseball team at Tennessee. So this is where I say "Go Vols" usually, and the tech people don't really take too much offense to it, except for they just recently had a matchup with the baseball team. So, but I decided to go into ministry, and I thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I loved it, and I really enjoyed being able to mentor young men and being able to spiritually pour into them. And it was just everything. I loved it. I was making little to no money, and still, you love something when you're making little to no money and just fall in love with it more and more. But then my story kind of changes because I had a panic attack it was in 2018, about a year into my ministry calling, and my life has never been the same. I'm sure that you've taken care of people who have had mental illness disorders or panic attacks, and for me, I pretty much spiraled into depersonalization, very severe depression, and a host of all other things. I mean, you could tell my whole body was just not functioning properly. And so I went to the medical doctors, and as many people do, they were really frustrated with the options they were given. I was given naproxen, which is just Advil, just pretty a higher level of Advil or a different type of Advil, and for my chest pain. And I was just frustrated. I said, this isn't my this isn't my problem. It's not a naproxen deficiency. There's something else going on. And so I decided to tackle it naturally. I went to counseling. I started working out more. I started reading everything, researching everything, and really looking into the effects that the gut can have, and the gut can have on the body and the brain and mental illness, and how you can start to reverse those chronic illnesses or those depression, those depersonalization symptoms. But it was a really crazy time, and the Lord had to take me through a season of waiting and through the dark night of the soul, and I was just walking through what I didn't think I would ever walk through. And if anybody had known me up to that point, they would say I'm always happy, laid back, and relaxed, and there was nothing like that in my life at the moment. And so what happened to me was, if I backtrack a little bit, a couple of weeks before my panic attack, I had had what I think was a concussion or a pretty severe head blow from a soccer ball. Somebody crossed one across the field, and I tried to head it, and I didn't really play that much soccer in my adult life, and so I didn't really know how to handle it, and I got hit straight in the front of the head, and it knocked me down. I was pretty dizzy, and I didn't think anything of it. I got up and I was like, no, I'll be okay. And then sure enough, a week or two later, I have that panic attack, and my world just spirals. And so I look back at it and thinking, I can't clinically diagnose it now, but possibly back then I had a concussion that decreased my body's ability to fight, decreased my body's ability to function, and I just couldn't do anything after that. And so that panic attack came, and it was pretty much downhill after that. But um, doing the natural health route for me was kind of exploring and figuring it out, what I needed to do, and it eventually ended me up in a chiropractor's office because I'd thrown my back out working out, trying to get healthy, and I thought, man, I just need to get adjusted. I need to look at this. I'd never seen a chiropractor before. And so I go into the chiropractor's office, and he has a new patient orientation class where he kind of talks about expectations and what they do and how they do it and what to expect. And he started to talk about health, and he started to talk about how to gain it, how to maintain it, and how to reproduce it throughout the lifespan. And it brought everything together at that point. Everything that I had been learning, all the books, all the podcasts, all the TED Talks, all of it had come together in that moment. And it's like a light came on. And I thought, that's exactly what I need. My problem isn't that I'm depressed. My problem is that my body is fighting something and it's just surviving. It's just doing what it's supposed to do, but it's not in a state where it can function properly. And the way to restore that is restoring my body's ability to adapt to stress, and that's physical, chemical, and emotional stress. And after that, I kind of hit the ball running. I started to get better slowly over time, and eventually, um, about a year and a half later, which people don't talk about, it takes a long time to heal sometimes. And about a year and a half later, I was able to get out of that, and I felt completely 100% recovered from my mental illness. And I haven't experienced really any of those symptoms since. And I think that's because not only the Lord's grace in my life, but also just the ability to really focus on my health and make sure that my body's in a state where it can adapt. But I started to explore some other options after ministry, and I decided I didn't want to continue in the ministry. I just couldn't pour out anymore at that time. And I asked the Lord, what do you want me to do? And how do you want me to use my gifts and my abilities for your kingdom? And pretty much the response and the path that was laid out before me was chiropractic school, because I'd be able to impact people with the knowledge that he had given me, and that I'd stumbled upon, and then I could help people in the same situation. So now I get to help people, and I get to educate people about health, how to gain it, how to maintain it, and how to reproduce it across their lifespan in the lives of their families as well. So that's how I got to chiropractic school. And the last leg of the story is finding Dr. Elder at a seminar. Who Dr. Elder is our clinic director here, and he was teaching a seminar up in Colorado Springs about this weird technique where they only adjust the neck and let the body do the rest. And I had always been interested in it because people talk about it in school like it's the most critical area of the spine, and that's what I figured out now. And so me and my buddy Watson, we took a plane flight from Atlanta over to Colorado Springs in 2020 when nobody was really doing anything. And we got to learn, we got to figure out what this was about. And we went back to school pretty much on fire and started a club, started to teach people. And then after that, it was pretty much all that I wanted to do, is to take care of people in that really conservative, really specific, really gentle type of chiropractic care that had some science behind it and wasn't just like what you see on TikTok. And it really helped me be more of a clinician than just a technician when it comes to the chiropractic side of things. And so after school, I decided to move back to Knoxville for a little bit and tried to open my own small operation there for chiropractic, and just decided that I wanted to have somebody teach me. I wanted to work with somebody, make sure that I was doing the right thing for a little while, and reached out to Dr. Elder 3 years after I'd met him and said, "Hey, do you got any openings down in Lubbock?" And sure enough, I was here in about a month and a half. And so it's one of those things. I look back and you can see. I'm sure you've had this too. The Lord has put. You can see that there are kind of places where the Lord has put this in your path and redirected you. And you look back at that and think, this is exactly the Lord's doing. There's no other way that I'm here without that. So I moved to Lubbock about a year ago, and I met my now wife like 3 weeks, 4 weeks into moving here, and we got married in December of last year. So things have been moving a lot. Things have been changing, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So I'm extremely grateful to be here in Lubbock and doing the things that I'm doing, and really excited about the next leg of the journey. Really,
No, that's awesome, and that's quite the story too.
it's a little long too. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, it's good. I love to hear people's journeys, and the way the Lord just weaves things together.
hmm
Um, I definitely want to dive into and let you explain to the audience more about upper cervical in particular, and chiropractic in general for folks that don't know. I grew up
hmm
in a small town in Central Texas. I don't think there was a chiropractor in the town. And I'd never even heard of chiropractors, honestly. Both my granddads are
hmm
MDs, and both my uncles, two of my uncles, and I was just super allopathic. and actually had a college roommate of my brother's ask me during college what I thought about chiropractic school, and at that time I just started medical school,
Mhm.
like a arrogant and ignorant medical student. Like, no, you don't want to go to chiropractic school. They, I don't even know what that is, and I'm sure I badmouthed you, but
Sure. Bunch of quacks, you know?
yeah, I've publicly repented for that many times now.
Sure.
But before we go into maybe explain more of that, I want to go back on your story because what I picked up on that going to a conventional medical doctor like I used to be, and basically given an anti-inflammatory. I just want to highlight that for the audience as much as I can. I like to highlight so they're aware. Informed consent is really big in my world, and people need to be informed that medical doctors are trained to treat a symptom. So if they diagnose your symptom, I'm assuming is some sort of inflammatory process causing chest pain.
Sure.
Didn't seem to address the brain or mental side of that. But anyways, that's what doctors do. We treat symptoms, and that's across the board. Um, and I'm not going to go off on that tangent. Back to the Flexner report in 1910 when they tried to shut all the chiropractic schools and the herbalist and the homeopathics, and got a lot of that done. Outlawed some of them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Chiropractors were able to fight through that, I think, more legally, and were able to establish themselves. So chiropractic is more widely known and accepted now. But what struck me in your when you met that chiropractor is he just brought the truth
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
the body is designed to fix itself, and we know this. We just forget it when we walk into our allopathic doctor's office. From paper cuts to broken bones, it automatically heals itself.
Mhm.
But it knows how to do everything else too, and that's really at the core of chiropractic. The body will fix itself, heal
Yep.
itself, if you just give it what it needs.
Mhm.
And specifically in chiropractic, part of what it needs is good alignment and neurological flow of information to the body
Mhm.
to that innervates all those cells. But
Yeah.
in your journey, would you say, looking back in that year and a half or so, where you were slowly healing, and I like that too. It is a process. People want to get
Mhm.
better in a day and or a week, or no, it took you 30 years to get sick. It may take you a few months or a year
Yeah.
or two to get better.
Yeah.
Was there one specific thing? Was it really balanced as far as nutrition and exercise and sunshine and the I'm sure some spiritual work and emotional, and I mean, was it just a blend of all of it, or can you look back on your
Yeah.
particular case, because sometimes it is more prominent. If the gut is totally trashed and you get that back, that can be 80% of it. But in
Mhm.
other people, it's the guts, more minimal. So in your particular case, was there something predominant or that stood out in your getting well, or was it just slowly all of it coming together?
Yeah. Uh, I'll start by answering kind of the chiropractic question. So, chiropractic, like you said, is built on this belief that the body heals itself, given that there's no interference. And what we do as chiropractors is we find areas of interference, and primarily for us, that's areas where the proper communication from the brain to the rest of the body is not optimal. And that can be just joint position. And it gets more scientific as we get more money to do research and figure out what's going on. Years ago, they used to think that it was kind of like a hose, and if you press on a hose while it's flowing, the water doesn't get to the other side. It's not as simple as that anymore. That's kind of more just an easy way to explain it to laymen or to patients. And nowadays, we're seeing a bunch of impacts of how the posture of the spine, particularly the upper neck for us, is really intricately tied into brain function. And we know that brain function is the number one indicator of adaptability because it's able to because the brain and the nervous system through the spinal cord and rest of the nerves throughout the rest of the body. And you tie in the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system that help you be adaptable. We know that when the brain communicates, controls, and organizes every process in the body. So that's the immune system, the digestive system, the hormones, all of these things are coordinated and organized by the nervous system. And we see people come with the best side effects ever after an adjustment, whether it be fertility or whether it be stress or whether it be digestive relief, whatever it may be. And it's not always 100%, but there's always some type of role that the spine or the nervous system is playing. And ability to adapt. But so that's the first part of that, and I can tie that into the next. My journey was really multifaceted, and that's why we love working with people who are doing things like you guys are doing. And that's why when I thought, do I want to do a workshop on something, I thought, I don't want to do it by myself. I want to do it with other people who know other things, you know. And so it really takes a team. It takes a multifaceted approach. For us in the chiropractic world, I mentioned this earlier, the body's ability to adapt is dependent on its ability to get over the stressors in our life. And the stressors are physical, whether it be the small things you do, or the big things like car accidents, or stepping off a curb would be a small thing, or the way that you sleep, or posture, or the amount of exercise you get. The physical, chemical would be the next. That's the food we eat, that's the water that we drink, that's the air that we breathe here in Lubbock when the cotton's high, or when the dust is rolling in with the haboobs. And the emotional side of that, the third prong of that, is how we deal with the emotional side of stress. A lot of people are sick because they're going through a divorce, or a loved one died, or work is just completely depleting their adrenal glands, or whatever it may be. So it's impossible to just point just to one thing. For me, I started to exercise. I started to eat more whole food diets. I started to really focus on moving well. And then I threw my back out. I went to the chiropractor. I started to get my nervous system checked. I started to get adjusted when I needed to. That helped me out. And that was another leg in my story. I started to work with a counselor who was a spiritual counselor as well. And we got to walk through what I would call the dark night of the soul, which is something that St. John and the Cross kind of termed back in the day. Pretty much it's when you're walking through the darkness, you can't feel the Lord, you don't know where he is, and you just have to kind of stick to the basics, stick to the disciplines, and walk through that together. And it's also another time where the Lord just takes you deeper into that journey. He takes his felt presence, so you have to go seek him even deeper. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people just decide to not seek the Lord anymore. And instead, I decided to press in further. And so there's a spiritual side of that. And when I got to chiropractic school, I got into a little bit more functional medicine, which is honestly my route into chiropractic. So I still have a heart for it, and started to actually do some testing. So I tested my testosterone. It was tanked. I mean, I was 25 years old and had a 400 on my testosterone score, which is absurd. And so I decided to attack that. And then I was also looking at the actual integrity of my gut. So I took some more testing with some food allergy testing, and that honestly was the very final thing. Up until that point, I was still feeling anxious, still having really dry scalp, still having some nerve issues with my scalp. It was still tingling, and I was still having concentration issues. And once I did that, I got off of those foods that were causing an immediate reaction in my body and causing inflammation. And that was the final thing that did it. So over a year and a half, I implemented thing after thing after thing after thing on my journey to full recovery. And that's where the change really happened, when I was able to not only work with just one provider, but also be able to bring in a team who was helping me along the way. And that's why I think it's so important to be able to have relationships with other people in the community who know other things and do other things. And we try to stay in our lane. We try to make sure that the nervous system is functioning properly, and that the upper cervical spine is free of any movement abnormalities that's causing this dysfunction. And that's the beauty of it, that we get to work with people like you and people across the town that are doing other things that we can refer to and help with, because again, it does take a team.
Yeah. Well, and y'all are a great asset to the community for sure. Looking back, knowing what you know now on your own personal journey, your growing up years, I'm going to assume, although athletic and sports and all that, but pretty standard American diet wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then the trauma, the head traumas, how much do you think that was contributing to that, your ultimate symptomatology that came up? I mean, I know it's looking back and guesswork, but um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Gosh,
it's
yeah.
a missing piece is I guess what I'm going after. So many people, they accidentally, they'll hit their head on the counter under the kitchen sink or something, or tailgate, or car
Mhm.
wreck that they thought wasn't that bad, didn't have to go to the hospital, maybe a little whiplash. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a missing piece, I guess, is what I'm going after. So how much do you think that contributed versus just your standard American diet or other things to your personal
Gosh.
illness?
I think it was, man, that's hard to tell. I really think that it was one of those situations where it was the hay that broke the camel's back, and you can even see in the concussion research now that a body that has less omega-3 fatty acids in a ratio to omega-6s is more susceptible to brain injuries or to the inability to adapt to that head injury. Then you take into account what your magnesium level is, and we know that most of the population is deficient in magnesium, and so that's another part of the story because the magnesium actually blocks the NMDA receptors and doesn't allow calcium to flood in and pretty much destroy the cell and destroy the ATP or the energy production. So a lot of people are saying that magnesium could be neuroprotective before a concussion, so something they should even be on before. And so maybe that's a as magnesium kind of gets out of our American diet, maybe that's why we see concussion rates go up, or maybe it's just awareness. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely multifactorial, no doubt about it. And I want to encourage the listeners or patients, tackle it all. I mean,
Hmm.
but don't let it overwhelm you either. I mean, you can just start making these basic steps. And I always like to remind people, our ancestors, our great great grandparents, they didn't know all the science. They didn't know about NMDA receptors and magnesium
Mm-mm.
and all this stuff. But they had some commonalities that Weston Price found. They were outside getting sunshine, eating real food, mineral rich food, saturated
Hmm.
fat, from animal products that gave fat soluble vitamins that are very, very protective. They weren't getting the omega 6s from the vegetable oils like we are today. They weren't
Hmm.
eating nutrient depleted food. They were eating nutrient. I was reading an article the other day. It was like 98% of all the nutrients in real food are not even quantified yet. There's like
Mm.
150 vitamins and minerals have been quantified in something like 30,000
Hmm.
that
And we
we
don't
know
even know.
they're in there, but we don't know they don't have a name. We don't know what they do. And the synergistic effect of that. And of course, the standard American food has none of that in it because it
Hmm.
gets stripped away. But anyways, a
Absolutely.
lot can get done with just hitting these basic things. So don't let this overwhelm you. But we are going to get into some more specifics now on
Hmm.
the concussion side of things. And the seminar, again, I want to make sure everybody knows this Tuesday, the 5th, is the concussion seminar. It's here at the Merck, 1320 Texas Avenue, and that'll be featuring Casti Luna, our nurse practitioner from Veritas, and then Ben Hunt, neurokinetic therapy, from the Veritas Movement Lab, and then Dr. Al Cobb from the Blair Clinic here in Lubbock, with
Hmm.
Blair Chiropractic Technique. So, um, Dr. Al, I'll just let you kind of talk more about how this workshop came to be, and maybe some of the specifics on concussion,
Yeah.
and what people might expect to learn at the workshop.
What got me really interested in it about 6 months ago, we actually got a referral, I think, from you guys, and it was a post concussion case. And gosh, it was one of those things that you get and you think there's got to be some other ways to help this. And I'll tell you a little bit of the story. So she had come to us, and maybe it wasn't from you guys actually, but she had come to us from just an internet referral, internet search, because she thought maybe my neck is hurting, I have headaches, and I have dizziness. And so one of the things that she presented with was extreme dizziness. She couldn't really drive that well. She was having to be dropped off. She had really bad light sensitivity, so I could tell there was something neurologically going on. And up until that point, she had been seeing a vestibular PT who'd been doing amazing work with her. And I've grown a relationship with him as well now too because of that. So she also had a full list of just medical visits that were kind of interesting to me. And so I started to think about more of it. And she said she had a car accident about a year and a half prior, and it was really bad. She got sent to the emergency. She got taken to the hospital for the emergency room, which is pretty standard after a car accident if they think something's going on. But they kind of released her and said, just relax for several days, let the symptoms go away, and then you should be good to go. Which is bad practice nowadays. Now that knowing the research that we know, but her story impacted me because I started to put some things together, and I thought she's got some brain inflammation, she's got some gut inflammation, she's got light disturbances, she's got a problem in her neck as well. And I thought there's got to be more information on this out there. And I've got some friends who do concussion work, so I reached out to them. But the one thing that struck me, and I tell people this in her story, that after her car accident, she about a week later, she started having just extreme nausea, and then her stomach was just torn up. And I thought that's really interesting. And I said, well, what did they do about it? And they said, well, eventually they just took my gallbladder out. And I thought, that's a really interesting thing to do. Maybe it wasn't a gallbladder issue, or maybe it eventually became one because the gallbladder worked overtime. But I thought, what a what a interesting concept. And so that made me really think even more and more about it. So what we know about concussions now, and again, it's still limited, I think, in the full scope of things, just like you were talking about with the nutrition concept. The interesting thing with concussions is they are truly a traumatic brain injury. They call them a minor traumatic brain injury, but they're still a traumatic brain injury. And the first thing, if you do think you've had a concussion, I would always recommend, if you have any type of severe symptoms, go get it checked out. You do not want to have any type of brain bleed or any type of severe thing going on, like a skull fracture or anything like that. So always get it checked out at your local provider, some emergency room, your primary care physician, whatever that may be for you. But what we know about concussions is a lot of times we used to think that it was just a direct hit to the brain, and it just a local blow right there and bruise the brain. Yes, that can happen. That can be part of the story. But what we know now is it's more of what we call a shearing of the brain and the nervous system. So it can also be a hit to the brain, the neck, or anywhere in the body that jolts the brain and the nervous system inside of there. So the brain is protected by the skull, and the spinal cord comes down and it's protected by the spine. And there are tons of attachments for all of those areas. And one of the things that we see is if you do have a whiplash injury, a whiplash associated disorder, something like that from a car accident, from a hit, from a fall, whatever it may be, we know that you're likely stretching the actual brain, stretching the neurological tissue. And a lot of times it actually damages the smallest cells in the body called the neurons. And it can actually break those neurons, cause some inflammation, and immediately you have inflammation in the brain. And that's why people get groggy or they get really sleepy right after. And then the immediate thing that happens is there's this cascade of inflammation. So it's not just a brain issue, it's a full body inflammation type of thing. And the inflammation is good. It has to happen in order to clear up all of the debris, all of the dead particles, and get it out of the brain. Unfortunately, that's not always the story. There's continued effects, and typically after that initial inflammation, it does go down, but there's an immediate use of all of the energy storage, or most of the energy storage in the brain. So that's why people get groggy or fatigued or have brain fog. And then there's actually a depletion in the energy of the brain, which is called ATP, because we've used all of it up, and the calcium that's supposed to live and exist outside of the cell rushes into the cell and pretty much, for lack of a better term, destroys the cell. So then we have decreased energy, decreased activation in the brain, and it causes a lot of inflammation. And it's not just a brain issue at that point, because like I said, the brain organizes and controls every aspect of the rest of the body. So then you've got to think about your hormones. In The hormones are typically controlled by the pituitary gland, which sits in a little cup in the brain, pretty much, and it's connected there. So we even see people that have hormonal issues because not only their gut is disrupted in the process, but also that shearing of the brain actually holds the pituitary gland in that cup, and it stays there while everything around it shifts. So it's almost like a shearing right there as well. So there's neurological damage at the level of the pituitary gland. So hormones are messed up. And so what I'm trying to get at is that there is enough force that causes the brain and the nervous system to jolt around, and then you get a full body effect, not just a brain, not just a headache. You get a full body effect of that. The last thing I note on the full body thing is that we know that within a couple of hours, intelligently, the body's doing exactly what it needs to do. Within a couple of hours of that immediate impact, there is an increase in gut hyper and pretty much in leaky gut. So the intestines, they become more they become more spread out in the gut so that they can get things in and out quickly. Unfortunately, that creates
Hyperpermeable.
leaky gut. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the word I was looking for. I knew it was hyper. I just couldn't get it out at the moment. So gut hyperpermeability, it increases its ability to get things in and out, which is good, but in the long term, again, it's not. And so it's it's one of those things that I think when I put it into context of my story, you asked to can I just comment on that and see if that's maybe what was going on. I think it was. I think I had a head injury, and I think that my I immediately got some type of intestinal hyperpermeability. And then on top of that, I already had a horrible diet and I wasn't exercising much. And then on top of that, I had mental stressors in my life, and it all in an instant just kind of came down. But
Yeah. And
I'll circle. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say this is a good point a place to remind people about the resiliency. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. Really,
Mm-hmm.
we're just trying to build the body's ability to handle and adapt to stress, or I call it
Mm-hmm.
resiliency. And just
Mm-hmm.
like when you said all this inflammation needs to happen, there was trauma and damage. There's damaged cells, damaged neuron.
Mm-hmm.
There's disrupted physical matter that's got to be cleaned up. And that inflammation
Mm-hmm.
goes in there and kind of burns everything up, clears it out, moves it out. Now new stuff can grow. So it's a beautiful system
Mm-hmm.
designed perfectly. But as
Mm-hmm.
you said earlier with the magnesium, if your magnesium's way down here and your calcium's up here, and then part of this process, the calcium does need to come in, but at some point it needs to shut off. That mag's got to shut it off. So there's this perfect orchestration of all this
Mm-hmm.
things coming in and out, and inflammation and stop, and let's repair. And but everything, the body needs all those minerals and all those vitamins and the sunshine and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
more you can bring all these things in, the more resiliency. Now your body's ready to take this hit,
Mm-hmm.
have some damage, but now kick in the repair mode. And what happens? We get stuck M1, M2, M1, pro-inflammatory, M2,
Mm-hmm.
anti-inflammatory, and repair and recovery. And what the literature is pretty clear on now, most Americans are so out of balance with their diet and lifestyle, sitting all day, artificial light, nutrient depleted food, not enough oxygen at night from sleep apnea, mouth breathing, all this shallow upper chest breathing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're so out of balance. We get stuck. We go into M1, pro inflammatory, and we get stuck there. And the switch that needs a flip to kick in the M2 repair phase, that
Mm-hmm.
switch doesn't flip. And so I just want the listeners to be reminded that this resiliency building thing, it's huge, not just for concussion, but for everything. The body's an amazing design to take a hit, to repair itself, come back in and regrow everything. But we're so far from that balanced state, not only nutritionally, but across the board. So want to throw that in
Mm-hmm.
there, but go ahead. You were
Yeah.
going somewhere next.
Oh no, I would agree with you. I believe that the body is. We were told this in school, and I can't think of an instance where it's not true. The body never makes a mistake. It always adapts and performs perfectly for what the environment is given. Especially when you take into account what is going on in your own body already. So it only adapts to the level that it possibly can, and it's always 100% adapting. So that's one of the things that was drilled into me when I was in school. But I did want to circle back and kind of update that case that I was talking about earlier. So we did find out that she had a problem in her neck that hadn't been fully addressed yet. And so we did some really light adjusting. And here at the Blair Clinic, Dr. Blair years ago decided that the best way to adjust the upper cervical spine is very gently, very specifically. So we take a 3D x-ray of the spine, and then we can actually point to the joints and the dysfunctional areas that are likely the root cause of that problem in the neck, and we adjust lightly. It's not what you see on TikTok. It's not twisting or cracking or jerking or popping. It's very light, very gentle adjustments. And then we let the body do its thing. We get out of the way as much as we can. And so she, after about 3 months of care, she emailed us on a Friday and said, "Hey, I wanted to invite you guys to church this Sunday because I finally get to get back up and lead worship, because prior to that point I couldn't handle the lights and the sound. It just was too overstimulating for me, but now I'm actually able to lead worship again." And so that's one of those amazing stories that I tell people and that I internalize, because I was able to play a small part in her journey of getting her life back exactly like I had been. And so I was able to play a small part in that journey of impacting her life, to be able to do what she was called to do, and that was to be the worship leader at her church. And so that was a beautiful thing. But yeah, at the concussion workshop, we're going to really dive deep into this full prong approach, because I kind of look at it like three areas. So the anytime you have some sort of concussion, it takes enough force to cause a problem in the neck. So we always want to be able to check the neck, and that's not always the final thing that needs to be done. It's not always the only thing that needs to be done. That's why we're working with Cassidy Luna, the pediatrician at Veritas, because she understands homeopathy at a different level than I do. And she understands what it looks like to incorporate smaller nutritional changes, smaller lifestyle changes, to be able to hopefully push your body out of that state of inflammation and into a state of recovery, adaptation, resilience. And then the other part of it is the neurological side. So we work with a lot of people who have dizziness or vertigo from this concussion, and it's been maybe 5, 10 years since the concussion and it's still there. And it's because when you have that shearing of the brain, there is there's a point where the eyes, the brain, and the balance centers and the neck all become disconnected. And so that's why people, they can't look at things for too long, or they're driving and there's too much stimulation on the road, and it's because their eyes aren't communicating properly with their brain, and their brain's not communicating properly with their cervical spine. And so and that's why people get dizzy, because their brain literally has no idea where it is in space and how it's supposed to function in that space. And then it's hard to not use up all the energy in your brain, and then they get fatigued, and then they get a headache, and it's just an ongoing cycle. And so that's why we brought in Ben as well, Ben Hunt, to be able to really assess the neurooptokinetics and further it along that cycle, as well as start rehabbing those other areas in the spine where maybe some muscles need to be more activated than others, and then also working on the fuller posture of the spine. Because I mean, I've been working with Ben Hunt for a couple of months now on my form and my posture and my movement, and he has changed my life with the information he's been given to be able to help me posturally. And it's helping me even be a better chiropractor, because my body's even more out of pain than it was before, and I'm just so grateful for it. But so we're going to really take a full well-rounded look at what's going on in people's lives and help them heal from the neurological stress, from from the concussion that's causing cervical spine issues or neck issues, and the full body issues of inflammation and getting that back on track, and then some supplementation protocols as well, I'm sure. And then also how we rehab the brain specifically. So there's so many different areas, and we'll help people. I didn't want to make this just for clinicians. I wanted it to be able to be accessible for parents, for athletes, for training staff, for coaches, and for people who just generally care about their loved ones who may have had a concussion, or who have gone through that and don't know where to turn anymore, who are getting answers that they don't want to hear, or they don't feel hopeful in other settings. And we would just love to educate the Lubbock community and the surrounding communities to be able to really take a deep look at what is going on with the concussion, what can I do immediately, and what if I have those symptoms for longer than a month, 2 months, years? Is there any hope for me then? And what can I do? And who can I go see at that point? So that's our main goal for the workshop, and that's really what we're trying to drive home, is just educating the public in order to be able to see if there's anything they could do, if there's any hope to be had, which I believe that there is.
Yeah, there's always hope for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's upstairs at the Merc, Tuesday, March 5th, 5:30 to 6:30. You can go
Mm-hmm.
to blairclinic.com. I'm sure in the show notes we'll put the information there. But
Mm-hmm.
blairclinic.com is Dr. Al Cobb's website, along with Dr. Gordon Elder here locally in
Mm-hmm.
Lubbock. We have a few more minutes, Dr. Al. Is fascinating to me. And I've had Dr. Gordon Elder on the program. It's been years ago. So listeners, y'all can go back on the archive page on our website, veritaswellnessmember.com, and just find Dr. Elder's old interview to learn more about his story. But maybe touch a little bit on Blair Clinic, because that actually started here in Lubbock. Dr. Blair
Mm-hmm.
um, came up with this technique years ago, I think in the
Mm-hmm.
40s, maybe. I forget the
Yeah.
story. And had
1949. Yeah.
yeah, why don't you share some of that kind of
Yeah.
history and just how it
Gosh.
spread, and then it kind of closed down. Then Dr. Elder came back from
Yeah.
California, came to Lubbock to get that original location going
Mm-hmm.
again.
Yes. So Dr. Blair, funny story with him. He had a severe case of asthma when he was growing up, and he had pediatric asthma. And so when his doctors at the time told his parents, we don't think he's going to live past his teenage years. So just kind of prepare for that. And pretty much he went to a chiropractor eventually and started to be able to breathe again. And he decided, I'm going to chiropractic school. Kind of the same story. And a lot of chiropractors actually have that story. But he was at the point where his classmates had to carry him upstairs at school and stuff. And he just got better and better and better, and wanted to reproduce that in people's lives. And so he went to chiropractic school. And eventually, I don't know why he chose Lubbock when it has probably the highest asthma agitators in the air. I don't know, but he decided to come back to Lubbock, started the clinic in 1949, and worked really hard to change the change those patients' lives who were really frustrating. And I say that in the sense that they were frustrating because they had symptoms that weren't resolving, or they had a really complex case. And so he thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so he changed his x-rays around. He started looking at different areas, and then started to formulate adjusting techniques based off of those x-rays that he saw. And it's funny, the Blair Chiropractic Techniques Society is putting together a textbook, and one of the chapters is kind of just an overall history and how Dr. Blair came to these conclusions. It's so long ago, and the guy who's kind of putting that chapter together reached out to me, because I tell people we live kind of in like a historical library here. We have so much of Dr. Blair's stuff, and we even have his chiropractic school notes. So we have a bunch of stuff, and I just kind of peruse through it every once in a while. But I was looking at some X-rays, and they were from the late 50s, and they had they had post, they had a bunch of stuff, and the folder on it said examples. And the guy reached out and said, man, I'm looking for a bunch of x-rays, and they would be pre and post, and they would be from the late 50s. And I thought I've seen those before, I think. And so we got together and we got those x-rays to him, and but it was cool because I say that because Dr. Blair spent so much time figuring out what is going on, and he actually took the time to do the research and look and see this is this is what happened before the adjustment. This is what it looked like. This is what happened after. This is what happened 6 months after. And so he was just a meticulous mind of putting all this information together, and it's grown and adapted and changed over time. But I think that's what he wanted. And so when he passed away in the 80s, I think that's right. A guy named Dr. Addington took over from him, who had been learning from Dr. Blair for a while, and I think Dr. Blair pretty much was the only person that he trusted to take the clinic, and he ran that for 30 or 40 years, and Dr. Elder was learning from Dr. Addington, and Dr. Addington passed away, and but right up until the end, the clinic had gone down. The amount of patients that he was able to serve had just diminished because he had some health problems as well. And so Dr. Elder wanted to take over and rejuvenate and revitalize the clinic here because we know how important it is. And so yeah, he came here in 2018, and that's probably about the same time that you guys had met. And he he did just that. I mean, the clinic is able to serve a lot of people nowadays, and it's only because of the dedication that he and Ruth had, not only to the technique, but also to the to the clinic that and the legacy that Dr. Blair has put together. And so, man, it's just been so fun to play a part in that legacy as well. Now getting to serve in the same vein as Dr. Blair. It's funny. We have patients now who are patients of Dr. Blair's when they were 5, 6 years old. And I always ask them when they come in, so how was it with Dr. Blair? And so they tell me some funny stories, or they'll tell me how strict he was, or whatever it was back in the day. But it's gosh, it's so fun to be able to be here and serve the Lubbock community. And now we're coming up on the in December of this year will be 75 years the Blair Clinic has been owned and operating and functioning and practicing the Blair technique here in Lubbock. So it's kind of, gosh, I'm sure it's probably one of the longest, if not the oldest, chiropractic clinics here in Lubbock.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and I think most Lubbock residents don't even know about that. But Dr.
Hmm.
Blair established something here, basically invented something, spread across the
Hmm.
country. I don't know about the world, but and it's
Oh
been
yeah.
revitalized by Dr. Gordon Elder. So a little shout out to
Hmm.
Dr. Elder and Ruth both. They've
For
been
sure.
really proactive in trying to bring the Lubbock health community. You may say alternative health community, but they have a passion for people being well in this community. So that
Hmm.
I mean, they put little get-togethers with various healthcare practitioners. So if you are a healthcare practitioner, and you don't have to be
Hmm.
alternative. I mean, if you're just interested in helping patients, this group meets it. Like Dr. Al said earlier, there's these subspecialists, there's people that know better and different things. You come together as a
Hmm.
community and a team, for the benefit of the people and the patients, you get a
Hmm.
lot more done. So
Yeah.
y'all reach out to Dr. Gordon Elder and Dr. Al Cobb. BlairClinic.com is their website. You can also sign up for the concussion protocol there. Down the show notes, we'll have these links.
Hmm.
And if you're just a patient, even without a concussion, but interested in learning more about upper cervical, check out their website, BlairClinic.com. And then you mentioned, I think, Instagram or social media. What's the
Hmm.
best way for people to find you or follow you,
Yeah.
Dr. Al?
Yeah, you can search me, Dr. It'd be dr.al, ALCOBB, Dr. Al Cobb on Instagram, and you can actually follow the Blair Clinic. It's just Blair Clinic on Instagram, and find us on Facebook. But yeah, I have a sign up form in my personal bio on Instagram, and I'll send that to you guys so you can add in the show notes as well. It's just a Google form. You can just sign up. It gives some information and just lets us know that you're going to be there. But yeah, I can't wait to be able to partner with Veritas and be able to offer this into the community. And I'm excited to work with Ben and Cassidy. It's been really fun. They've been letting me know some of the other stuff that's going on in Veritas as well. So I'm excited for the future. I'm excited with partnering and really excited to bring this service to Lubbock.
Well, we appreciate you and Dr. Elder, everything y'all are doing over there at the Blair Clinic. So thank you. And thank you for
Yeah.
your time. I know you're a busy man. Takes a lot to peel you away for an hour, but I know everyone will enjoy the show and get a lot of benefit of not only a concussion workshop, but all you're doing. So thank you for being on the show. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards. I'm very, very grateful for you, and we're grateful to have you as a partner here in Lubbock as well.
Well, likewise. All right, everybody. Dr. Ben Edwards here. You're the Cure. We'll archive this veritaswellnessmember.com, also on iTunes and on YouTube. So check that out. Share it with your friends. Appreciate y'all listening and tuning in. We'll be back next week with another great show. I'm Dr. Ben Edwards. You're the Cure. See you next time.